I'm Margaret Ellis, 58 years old, a widow living in a small suburban neighborhood outside Seattle. For nearly 2 decades, I've worked as an administrative assistant at an insurance company, dedicating my life to raising my only son, James, now 30. I did everything to ensure he didn't face the struggles I had. The sleepless nights worrying about mortgage payments, the lean months after my husband died suddenly from a heart attack. I put my own needs aside, worked overtime, and gave up personal hobbies, all so James could have a better life. Last Monday, a text from James shattered my heart. The message had no subject, just a short line. "Mom, we need to talk." I smiled, thinking it was an invitation to his engagement party with Emily, his college sweetheart. I had contributed $30,000 for the wedding, from the venue to the band, and was planning to send another $70,000 to help them buy a house. But when I opened the full message, I froze. "Mom, after talking with Emily and her family, we've decided to have a small wedding. Just close family. You can watch the live stream if you want. I'll send the Zoom link." No apology, no explanation, just a closing line. "It'll be like you're there." I sat there, my tea going cold in my hands. No tears, no trembling, just an overwhelming emptiness. I replied, "All right, James. Wishing you happiness." No arguments, no pleading. I knew my silence would speak louder than words. I turned off my phone, finished my tea, and went to work as usual. But inside, I knew everything had changed. That was the day I realized my sacrifices no longer mattered to James. That was the day I decided to let go. The drive to the office was quiet, Seattle's damp air surrounding me, raindrops sliding down the windshield. I thought about the years gone by, the extra shifts to pay for James's college tuition, the vacations I never took, the dreams I shelved so he could chase his. When James wanted to study engineering, I paid for extra courses. When he moved to San Francisco for a startup, I covered his rent. When he went through his first breakup, I spent hours on the phone comforting him. I never kept score, because that's what a mother does, right? But that text made me feel like a wallet, useful until it's empty. At the office, my colleague Sarah noticed something was off. "Margaret, you look like you've lost someone," she said, placing a cappuccino on my desk. I wanted to tell her my son didn't invite me to his wedding, but I just smiled and said I was tired. She didn't push, just patted my shoulder. That small gesture nearly made me cry. It reminded me I still existed, even in my quiet pain. During lunch, my phone buzzed incessantly. Texts from James. "Mom, please respond. I don't want you to be mad." I didn't reply. I sipped my coffee and thought, maybe it's time to stop being the ever-ready, ever-sacrificing mother, only to be excluded from the most important moments. That afternoon, I took action. After work, I drove to the bank, rain still falling lightly, streetlights glowing faintly in the fog. The branch manager, Henry, greeted me as usual. "Ms. Ellis, what can I do for you today?" I sat down, my voice steady. "I want to cancel a transfer." He raised an eyebrow. "The $70,000 for the wedding?" "Yes." He hesitated, checking the system. "You're sure? That's a significant amount." "Circumstances have changed," I said, offering no further explanation. I signed the papers, canceled the transfer, and left the bank with an odd sense of relief, as if I'd shed an invisible weight. At home, I found 7 missed calls from James and a voicemail. "Mom, why did you do that? We need that money." I turned off my phone, poured a glass of wine, and sat on the couch. The soft yellow light illuminated family photos on the shelf. James as a child, grinning beside a birthday cake I made, my husband and me on our wedding day. moments that now felt like they belonged to another life. I thought about the years of solitary dinners, the vacations I never took, the dreams I set aside. I thought about James's "it'll be like you're there," as if my presence was optional, not essential. And I thought about myself, a woman, not just a mother. Days later, James came to the house. He knocked, his voice tense. "Mom, open the door.
We lost the venue because you canceled the money."
I opened the door, calm. "Hello, James." He stepped inside, frustrated. "Why would you do that? This is my big day." I looked him in the eye. "And I'm your mother." "But I wasn't invited, James. I'm just a Zoom spectator." He shook his head. "Emily's family wanted to keep it small. You know that." "I paid $30,000, I said. "That's not small. That's a choice." He went quiet, then said, "You always make everything about you." Those words cut like a knife. "Get out," I said, my voice firm. He looked stunned. "Mom." "Get out, James. I'm tired of being the villain in a story I wrote with my heart." He left, the door closing like a final punctuation mark. I woke to dozens of texts from James, anger, then pleading. "Mom, we lost the venue. Emily's crying. Why would you do this?" Then, "Mom, I'm sorry, okay? We'll invite you, but we need the money first." I didn't respond. The apology came too late, and I didn't want my presence to be a transaction. I started seeking change. I had lived for James too long, and now it was time to live for myself. After many nights of reflection, I decided to leave Seattle. I found a small coastal town in Maine, where the wind-swept bay and picturesque scenery called to me. Rugged cliffs stretched into the sea, waves crashing in white foam, their sound like the ocean's whisper. Pine forests stretched wide, fragrant with resin, mingling with the salty breeze. Each morning, the sun rose fiery red on the horizon, gilding the shimmering water, while seagulls soared in the deep blue sky. I sold my house, packed essentials, a few books, my baking tools, and an old painting of my husband's, and moved there without looking back. In this town, I opened a small bakery called Wind Haven. I always loved baking. Days spent making cookies with James when he was young were my fondest memories. The bakery faced the bay, with large windows overlooking crashing waves and fishing boats drifting lazily. I baked fragrant sourdough bread, cinnamon-dusted apple tarts, and buttery shortbread cookies that locals adored. Each morning, I woke to the smell of flour and the sound of waves, feeling peace for the first time in years. In the afternoons, as the sunset painted the bay purple, I stood behind the counter, watching the last rays glint on the water, and told myself this was where I belonged. One autumn afternoon, as golden pine needles fell outside, I was wiping the counter when a man walked in. He was about my age, with salt and pepper hair, and a smile warm like winter sunlight. "I hear the cookies here are the best in town," he said, eyes twinkling. I smiled. "Try them and find out." He introduced himself as Thomas, a widower living with his daughter and 2 grandchildren a few miles away. He became a regular, bringing stories of his family, fishing trips with his grandson, or how his daughter threw birthday parties for the kids. Thomas had a sincerity that put me at ease, like I could be myself without hiding. We became friends. Thomas shared about his late wife, the days he learned to be a single parent, and the joy of seeing his children and grandchildren happy. I told him about James, the pain of being excluded from his life, and my decision to come to Maine. He didn't judge, just listened. "Sometimes," he said, We have to leave the familiar behind to find what truly belongs to us. One evening, Thomas invited me for a walk along the bay. I hesitated, but agreed. We strolled a cliffside path, waves crashing below, white foam sparkling like gems. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple, reflecting on the water like a living canvas. Thomas pointed out a flock of seagulls circling, sharing stories of sitting here with his wife, watching the sea and dreaming of the future. "Now I'm here with you," he said, his voice warm. I smiled, feeling the warmth of his hand as he gently touched mine. We sat on a large rock, listening to the waves and sharing small stories, simple moments that felt complete. Our outings grew frequent. One night, Thomas brought an old blanket and a bottle of wine, leading me to a small beach near town. We spread the blanket on the sand, under a silver moon illuminating the shimmering sea. He spoke of his youthful sailing trips. I shared about the first cakes I baked for James. We laughed, fell silent, then laughed again, as if time was no longer a burden. When the sea breeze turned cold, Thomas draped his jacket over my shoulders, and I noticed my heart beating faster, not from anxiety, but from joy. Another time, Thomas invited me to dinner at his home with his family. His house sat on a hill, surrounded by pine forests, with a view of the windswept bay. Inside, the air was filled with laughter. His daughter, Anna, greeted me like an old friend, and her 2 children chattered about school. Over grilled salmon and mashed potatoes, I found myself smiling, truly smiling, not out of duty, but because I wanted to be there. Thomas held my hand under the table, gently, and I didn't pull away. As candlelight flickered, I felt not just a guest, but part of this warm moment. James sent a few emails in the months that followed, mostly blame mixed with half-hearted apologies. "Mom, we had the wedding in Emily's backyard. Small, like we wanted. You happy now?" I read them but didn't reply. His wedding happened without me, and I wasn't angry, just done. I had given everything, and now I chose myself. In Maine, I lived as me. Each morning, I opened the bakery, baking fragrant loaves, watching locals chat over coffee. I walked along the bay, where waves sang endless melodies, and cliffs stood as silent companions. I took up landscape painting, trying to capture the vibrant sunsets or frothy waves crashing ashore. Thomas became an integral part of my life. We went fishing on his old boat, shared dinners by the fireplace, and planned a trip to Nova Scotia to explore ancient lighthouses and coastal towns. One evening, as we sat on the beach, the moon hanging over the bay, Thomas took my hand. "Margaret," he said, "you remind me that life still has so much to offer." I looked at him, the moonlight reflecting in his eyes, and smiled. "Thomas, you remind me that I deserve to be happy." For the first time in decades, I woke up without wondering who needed something from me. I learned that love isn't unconditional sacrifice, but mutual respect. In this small town by the windswept bay, with Windhaven Bakery, my landscape paintings, and Thomas by my side, I found happiness, true happiness, not something I had to pay for with myself. The bay, with its endless waves and radiant sunsets, reminded me that life, at any age, can begin anew.